Elias Voss had always carried his name like a quiet promise carved into seasoned heartwood. His father Harold had chosen it 30 years prior, in the sawdust-choked warmth of his backyard woodworking shop, where the air hung permanently thick with the layered scent of cedar shavings, linseed oil, and aged pine resin. The shop was a small, clapboard structure at the end of their driveway, its floors scuffed and stained by 40 years of labor, its walls lined with hanging chisels, hand planes, and sanding blocks arranged in perfect, quiet order. Harold spent every daylight hour there, shaping oak and walnut into custom cabinets, mullioned window frames, and the occasional hand-carved fireplace mantel for families across the county. His hands were a living ledger of that lifetime of craft, calluses layered so densely they could abrade industrial sandpaper without friction, a pale jagged scar slicing across his left thumb from a runaway chisel when Elias was 7. Fingernails permanently stained deep umber with walnut dye that never fully washed away, no matter how hard he scrubbed at the sink after work. Elias had grown up in that shop, perched on a stack of lumber scraps while his father worked, watching shavings curl off the plane like delicate brown ribbons. He learned to be quiet there, to occupy space without demanding attention, to find fascination in the slow, steady transformation of raw wood into something useful and beautiful. The lesson of his name was not spoken often, but it wove itself into every afternoon he spent in that sawdust-scented air. A forest does not shout to prove its strength, Harold had told him once, when Elias was 12 and came home from middle school with red-rimmed eyes and a scraped knee. The other boys had taunted him for hours, the quiet kid, the ghost. Why do you even come to class if you never talk? He'd run all the way home, boots thudding on the gravel driveway, and hidden himself in the back corner of the workshop, his shoulders shaking. Harold had not rushed to coddle him. He'd set down his hand plane, wiped fine cedar dust from his flannel sleeve, and knelt to meet his son's glistening eyes, his weathered palm coming to rest heavy and gentle on Elias's narrow shoulder. It grows in silence. Deep, tangled roots beneath the soil where no one sees, tall, unyielding branches reaching for light, steady through storm and drought. That is quiet power. That is who you were meant to be. That lesson did not merely register in Elias's mind, it seeped into his muscle memory, his nervous system, the quiet core of his identity, hardening over the years into something as immutable as cured oak. Harold imparted a second, harsher truth on a sweltering July afternoon when Elias was 14, the summer heat clinging to their skin like a damp wool blanket as they planed a solid white oak slab for a custom library bookshelf. The rusted shop fan whirred uselessly overhead, stirring only hot, sawdust-laden air, and Elias's arms burned with the repetitive strain of pushing the hand plane back and forth across the grain, sweat dripping off his chin onto the pale wood. "Burn this into your bones, boy," Harold had said. His voice graveled from decades of breathing fine wood dust, no softness to his tone, only the unvarnished honesty of a lifelong craftsman. A craftsman's worth never lives in his mouth. It lives in his hands. In every precise cut, every tight dovetail joint, every flawlessly sanded edge. Men can lie with words, twist the truth, talk their way out of failure. They cannot argue with work that holds true, year after year, generation after generation. Elias never forgot those words. They anchored him through the brutal all-nighters of design graduate school, through the isolating grind of studio semesters where louder, more charismatic peers weaponized charm over skill and stole credit for group work. They carried him through 3 long, soul-crushing years trapped within the polished, hollow walls of sycamore interiors. He'd walked into his interview fresh out of his master's program, bright-eyed and hungry to build something real, and Cale Rayner's grand promises had sounded like everything he'd ever wanted. 3 years in, he knew better. But he'd stayed because the work mattered to him, even when the man at the top did not. So when Cale picked up his printed resignation letter between 2 manicured, lotion-softened fingers, scanned the header for half a second, and scrawled his signature across the bottom without reading a single paragraph of the text, Elias said absolutely nothing. He did not flinch. He did not tense his jaw. He did not let the faint, bitter anger coiling low in his chest surface on his face. He simply stood motionless 3 feet from the mahogany executive desk, his weight evenly distributed on the plush wool carpet, his gaze fixed on the faint cathedral grain of the desk edge rather than the man behind it. He'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in his head, and he would not give Cale the satisfaction of seeing him crack. Cale was reclined in a top-grain Italian leather executive chair, one polished black designer loafer propped lazily on the desk's chrome footrest, a half-smoked Cuban cigar smoldering in a leaded crystal ashtray to his right. The office reeked of expensive cedar cologne, stale tobacco, and the quiet, unearned arrogance of inherited wealth. Gold-framed industry award plaques lined the floor-to-ceiling walls, every single one honoring design work Elias had conceived, drafted, and refined alone, through hundreds of late nights. The panoramic riverfront window framed Cale's matte black Porsche SUV, parked in a reserved private spot 20 floors below, glinting like polished onyx under the midday sun. The stock ticker scrolling across Cale's ultra-wide monitor glowed green, and Elias knew without looking that it had nothing to do with design, and everything to do with the money he'd helped Cale squeeze out of clients. The gold-tipped fountain pen scratched a lazy, dismissive arc across the white paper. "Fine. Get out." Cale's tone was bored, detached, as if he were swatting a gnat off his desk rather than dismissing the employee who had built his company's entire technical backbone. He flicked the signed letter aside with his index finger, sending it sliding across the polished desktop toward Elias, his eyes never lifting from the scrolling numbers on his screen. 3 years I carried you on payroll. Total loss for me, if we're being honest. Generic draftsman like you? I can hire 3 straight out of community college for $9,000 a month total. Easily replaceable. Disposable, really. Elias reached out and curled his fingers around the thin manila envelope Cale pushed forward next. It contained only his final paycheck, a generic termination slip, and no note of gratitude, no acknowledgement of the 600 custom design packages, 2,000 photorealistic renders, or proprietary material database he had gifted the company. The envelope's cheap copy paper was smooth and cold under his fingertips, a stark contrast to the textured drafting paper he worked with daily. He nodded once, a sharp, minimal tilt of his chin, and turned toward the glass office door without a backward glance. "Door closes behind you," Cale called after him, already clicking through unread emails, his attention entirely vanished. The hydraulic door clicked shut with a soft, final hiss, severing the thin barrier between the executive suite and the open-plan design bullpen. Mara Hale, the company's veteran HR manager, was waiting precisely outside the threshold, as if she had been stationed there all morning anticipating this moment. Her smile was professionally calibrated, warm enough to appear compassionate to onlookers, distant enough to enforce the cold corporate hierarchy that defined Sycamore. She clutched a black clipboard in one hand and a sleek silver ballpoint pen in the other, her charcoal blazer crisp and wrinkle-free, her chestnut hair pulled into a tight, unyielding bun that mirrored her rigid adherence to company policy. A faint whiff of vanilla perfume drifted off her as Elias stepped out. "Hey, Elias." Her voice was honeyed, practiced, stripped of all genuine warmth. She flipped the clipboard to present a single-page legal document, the fine print dense and intimidating to anyone who didn't know labor law. "Just need you to sign this quick voluntary separation agreement. Standard company policy for all terminations, you waive formal severance claims. Everyone signs it, no exceptions. It keeps the paperwork clean for both sides, you know how it is." Elias's gaze swept over the document for less than a second. He knew exactly what it was worth under state labor law, nothing but disposable tissue paper. A coercive clause unenforceable in court, a cheap trick deployed by small-time executives to exploit quiet, unassuming employees they believed would never consult a lawyer, never raise a fuss, never demand what they were legally owed. Mara knew it too. She was just following orders, and she was counting on him being too meek to push back. He took the pen from her outstretched hand. His signature flowed across the dotted line clean, steady, zero tremor in his wrist or fingers. 3 years of drafting precise architectural lines had trained his hand to remain unshakable, even when his mind churned with quiet resolve. Mara exhaled a subtle, relieved breath and patted his upper arm in a perfunctory, condescending gesture, the same motion one might use to soothe a well-behaved stray dog. Thanks for being reasonable, Elias. No hard feelings around the office, yeah? Keep in touch professionally, we'd love to see where you land. Elias handed back the pen. He did not reply that there were hard feelings, nor did he parrot her empty platitudes. He simply turned and walked toward the exit hallway, his rubber-soled drafting shoes silent on the plush charcoal carpet. He was not signing this agreement out of compliance, nor out of defeat. He was signing it because he understood a truth none of them could comprehend in their obsession with surface-level profit and status. The most valuable thing he possessed was not locked in a filing cabinet, not printed on a paycheck, not bound to company property. It lived in code he had written, logic he had engineered, roots he had buried deep within Sycamore's digital foundation. That thing they could never take away. That thing they would not discover until it was far too late to fix. Halfway to the elevator bank, Elias paused and tilted his head upward, glancing toward the third-floor bullpen where he had spent 3 years and 2 months of his life. The overhead LED lights were still blazing in his corner cubicle, the last workstation left illuminated each night without fail. He could visualize the space perfectly, etched into his memory from thousands of late hours, his chipped ceramic travel mug, stained dark brown at the base from endless black coffee, perched beside his monitor. He'd bought it his first week from the corner bodega, on sale for $3, and the chip along the rim had come from a tired 2 a.m. stumble when he knocked it against his keyboard. A crumpled bottle of antacid tablets in the top desk drawer, his constant companion through years of skipped lunches and stress-induced gastritis, the crinkly aluminum foil always sticking out just far enough to grab one-handed without looking up. A wall calendar pinned to the fabric partition, frozen on yesterday's date, a small faded red circle around the day he'd first walked through the door. He had drawn that circle on his first day of employment, a silent personal countdown scrawled in fine-tip marker. 3 years and 2 months. He had outlasted the quiet dread he'd felt walking through the doors that morning, longer than he'd ever expected to survive the hollow, exploitative culture of Sycamore Interiors. Cale Rayner deluded himself into believing his company's value resided in its marble showroom floors, gold-plated industry partnership plaques, and luxury sports car. He believed the brand name Sycamore Interiors was nothing more than a marketable logo, a sales pitch to wealthy clients with more disposable income than refined taste. He was catastrophically blind. The true value of Sycamore was invisible, buried beneath the consumer-facing gloss, the foundational layer no client, no critic, no employee besides Elias had ever fully understood. For 3 years, Elias had not merely drafted floor plans and polished renderings. He had built the entire invisible backbone of the firm. He had engineered the comprehensive material database, cataloging thousands of tile variants, hardwood grains, fabric weaves, and stone finishes with cross-reference durability, cost, and light refraction data so precise it cut material waste by 30% across every project. He had coded the proprietary spatial algorithm that calculated residential sight lines, foot traffic flow, and natural light penetration down to the millimeter, turning cramped floor plans into spaces that felt open and alive. He had built the ray-tracing lighting engine that turned flat CAD files into photographs indistinguishable from real life, the feature that had single-handedly boosted Sycamore's client closing rate by 40%. Even the company's flagship marketing selling point, the AI Instant Render system that cut client wait times by 70%, revolved around a custom core plugin named Source. Elias had written every single line of its complex code during unpaid overtime, holiday weekends, and sleepless nights when his stomach burned so fiercely he had to lean forward in his chair to breathe through the pain. He had not built the backdoor on day one. It had grown slowly, layer by layer, with every slight, every stolen credit, every empty promise. The first small line of access code had gone in 6 months in, after Lila had presented his award-winning waterfront design as her own at a client pitch and Cale had praised her genius vision. A few more lines had been added after his first skipped raise, after Cale had told him exposure is better than a paycheck right now. By the 3rd year, the permission lock was complete, irreversible, buried so deep in the architecture no one but him would ever find it. It was not revenge, exactly. It was insurance. It was proof that his work mattered, whether Cale chose to see it or not. Cale understood none of the technical mechanics. He only saw rising closing rates, glowing client testimonials, and growing monthly revenue, taking full credit for innovation he had never lifted a finger to create. What he would never learn was that deep within Source's encrypted architecture, Elias had embedded a single, irreversible permission backdoor, a root access lock permanently tethered to his official Sycamore work email and employee ID profile. The rules were simple, unalterable, hidden in encrypted documentation Cale had never bothered to read. If Elias's employee account remained deactivated for more than 48 consecutive hours, the system would not crash spectacularly. It would regress, methodically, inevitably. Every full-color photorealistic rendering would fade to monochrome vector line work. Every curated material specification would scramble randomly, swapping imported marble for cheap laminate, solid hardwood for vinyl plank. Every dimensional measurement would shift by fractional, destructive margins, turning engineered construction plans into costly structural errors. It was the digital equivalent of watching an oil painting dissolve back into a pencil sketch, then erode completely into blank, empty paper. This was Elias's unspoken, carefully calculated goodbye gift to Cale Rayner. That evening, Elias returned to his small, narrow rental apartment on the city's industrial fringe, a 20-minute drive from the riverfront high-rises where Sycamore's wealthy clients resided. He set the cardboard box of trivial desk mementos by the front door and kicked off his scuffed drafting sneakers, the rubber soles worn thin from 3 years of pacing the office floor during late-night problem-solving sessions. The apartment was quiet, the only ambient noise the distant hum of the highway and the faint rattle of the aging refrigerator in the kitchen. Thin beige curtains filtered the street lamp glow into muted orange streaks across the worn taupe carpet. The air smelled faintly of leftover takeout rice and lemon dish soap. It was not a luxurious space, lacking the marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows he designed for clients daily, but it was entirely his unmonitored, unpressured, free from the performative charisma and hollow corporate politics that had drained him for years. The kitchen sink had a slow leak he'd never gotten around to fixing, the bedroom window stuck when it rained, and the only view was of the brick alley behind the building. But every scratch, every imperfection, was his to tend to or ignore on his own terms. He carried the cardboard box into his bedroom and appended its contents across the unmade bed, the items spilling into a messy, tangible archive of his exploitation. 3 thick manila folders lay beneath his notebooks, metal ruler, and mechanical pencils, each one holding evidence he had quietly compiled over years, never intending to use until the day he walked away for good. The first folder contained overtime approval slips, 372 individual forms, each signed in Cale's looping, arrogant handwriting, authorizing after-hours work, weekend shifts, and holiday overtime. Not a single hour listed on those slips had ever been compensated. Elias flipped through them slowly, each sheet triggering a vivid sensory memory, the cold rain streaking the office windows during a Christmas Eve all-nighter, when he'd stayed till 2 a.m. fixing a wealthy client's last-minute layout change. The office so quiet he could hear the hum of the server room down the hall, sticky summer humidity seeping through the building's broken AC during a weekend database overhaul, his shirt sticking to his back as he debugged line after line of code, that one brutal December where he'd pulled 5 all-nighters in a row to hit a developer's rigid deadline, sleeping on the office couch for 2 hours a night, brushing his teeth in the break room sink. Cale had been fully aware of every hour worked, every sacrifice made, and had chosen to exploit it freely. Designers are creatives, not hourly laborers, Cale had declared in a mandatory team meeting 18 months prior, leaning back in his leather chair like he was bestowing ancient wisdom instead of justifying wage theft. You're artists. Art is priceless. So your overtime? That's priceless too. You're building your portfolio. That's payment enough. Elias's mouth tugged up at one corner, a dry, humorless twitch that barely moved his face. Priceless, right? Priceless didn't pay for antacids, or rent, or the car repairs he'd put off for 6 months because he couldn't afford the bill. The second folder held pay stubs. 3 years' worth, all neatly stacked in chronological order, the edges soft from being handled so many quiet nights. His starting salary had been $5,800 a month. 3 years later, it was still $5,800 a month. No raise, no cost of living adjustment, no bonus for the millions in revenue he'd generated. Nothing. Right next to them, tucked between two pay stubs from last spring, he'd slipped a single sheet he'd printed from the shared office printer one day, by accident, when Lila Rayner had left her account open on the break room computer. Lila was Cale's niece, fresh out of a 2-year community college design program, hired straight into a senior design associate role with her own private office and a company expense account. Her salary was $12,500 a month. More than double his. Her actual job, as far as Elias could tell, consisted of opening his finished renderings, sliding the saturation bar up 15% in editing software, and typing her name in the bottom right corner. She'd won 2 Rising Star industry awards with his work, giving glowing acceptance speeches where she thanked her mentor and Uncle Cale, and never mentioned the man who'd drawn every line. She'd thanked him once, sort of, by dropping a stale glazed donut from the break room on his desk and saying "good job on those files" in a tone that made it sound like she was his supervisor. The donut had sat there for 2 days before Elias threw it away. Elias set the pay stub aside, his fingers resting lightly on the paper. He'd never said anything about it. Never complained, never confronted her, never brought it up to Cale. He'd just kept working, kept building, kept putting one line of code, one pencil stroke, after another. Let them take the credit. The work itself was his, and that had always been enough until it wasn't. The third folder, the thickest one, was wrapped in brown craft paper and sealed with packing tape along every edge. Inside were digital voice recorder backups, 3 years' worth of meetings, phone calls, offhand comments he'd captured when no one was looking. He'd started recording after the first time Cale had promised him a promotion and then given it to Lila, just to have a record. He'd never planned to use them. He'd just wanted proof, for himself, that he wasn't making up the unfairness, that the gaslighting wasn't all in his head. He scrolled through the labeled audio files on his phone and selected one dated October 12th of last year. First was the all-hands company meeting, held in the main showroom with catered coffee and branded cookies. Cale's voice, booming and charismatic, talking about family and loyalty, and how every employee was part of the Sycamore team. "We don't just build houses," he'd said, to scattered polite applause. "We build futures. For our clients and for each other. We're all in this together." 3 days later, a second recording, captured through the thin drywall of the supply closet where Elias had been grabbing more printer paper. The closet was right next to Cale's office, and voices carried clearly through the studs. "Cut Elias's end-of-year bonus," Cale was saying to the finance manager, his tone casual, like he was ordering more printer ink rather than stealing thousands of dollars from an employee. "Blame it on the West Side project delay. Feed him some line about next year, big payout on the horizon, really make it sound like he's on track for a promotion. Guy's quiet. Won't make a fuss. He's the type that just takes it. Easiest mark on the payroll. He's the type." Elias sat back on his heels on the bedroom carpet, the recording still playing softly from his phone, tinny and thin in the quiet room. Yeah, that's what they all thought. He was the quiet one. The one who didn't go to team lunches, didn't show up to happy hours, didn't call Cale boss man, or laugh at his bad, misogynistic jokes. The one who never posted about company culture on social media, never performed loyalty for an audience, never brown-nosed or schmoozed or played the game. He just worked. In 3 years, he drafted over 600 full design packages, produced more than 2,000 photorealistic renderings, built a material database so comprehensive that 30 other design firms across the region had quietly stolen and copied it, passing it off as their own proprietary research. Independent industry analysts had valued that database alone at over $2 million. Cale paid him less than $70,000 a year. 3 years I carried you. Total loss. Elias huffed a quiet laugh. It came out breathy, almost soundless, barely stirring the air in front of his face. The absurdity of it sat heavy in his chest, thick and stale, like the smell of old coffee grounds left in a mug for days. His phone buzzed once on the bed beside him, the screen lighting up with a text from Quinn Torres, the only guy in IT who'd ever been halfway decent to him. Quinn was the only person in the whole company who'd ever asked him how the system worked, who'd recognized the skill it took to build something so complex alone. Dude, something's very wrong with Source. All the renderings are flipping to black and white line art out of nowhere. Lila's in Kale's office full-on ugly crying. Total chaos out here. Elias glanced at the digital clock in the corner of his laptop screen. 49 hours exactly since his employee account had been deactivated. He typed 2 words and hit send, his thumb hovering over the screen for half a second before he pressed send. Is that so? Then he powered off his work phone completely, pried out the tiny SIM card with a bent paperclip from his junk drawer, walked into the tiny bathroom, and dropped it into the back of the toilet tank. He heard it hit the cool water with a soft, final plink, then lowered the porcelain lid slowly, like closing a book on a chapter he never wanted to reread. No going back now. Not that he'd ever planned to. By the next morning, the regional design world was on fire. All 7 of Sycamore's active luxury residential projects had ground to a halt. Developers were blowing up Kale's phone before sunrise, screaming about missed deadlines and broken contracts, because the renderings they'd been promised, photoreal, polished, ready for high-stakes client presentations, had come back as garbled messes of black lines and mismatched, random textures. One developer had a meeting with a billionaire client that afternoon and had nothing to show for 6 months of work. Worse were the projects already under construction. Material specs had scrambled wholesale across every active job, no pattern, no warning. On one high-end custom home in the wealthiest neighborhood in the city, the system had output dimensions for a marble feature wall 12 inches wider than the actual wall space. The slab had already been cut and delivered from Italy, $42,000 worth of hand-selected Calicut marble, completely useless, reduced to construction debris before it was ever installed. The Sycamore office was a war zone by 9 a.m. Quinn texted Elias updates throughout the morning, even though he knew Elias probably wouldn't reply. Kale had screamed through 3 whole IT meetings, red in the face, slamming his fist so hard on the conference table the coffee mugs rattled, demanding the system fixed in 48 hours or every single IT employee was fired and blacklisted across the entire industry. Quinn had tried to explain, calm and careful, over and over. Kale, Elias built this whole thing from scratch. The architecture is totally custom, nothing off the shelf. We can't even find the main database access point, let alone rewrite the core plugin without breaking everything worse. We need him. Kale hadn't believed him. He'd called Quinn incompetent, called the whole IT team useless, and stormed out to hire an outside tech firm. He'd paid them a $15,000 rush deposit, let them work through the night on site, hovering over their shoulders every hour demanding progress. The lead consultant had found him the next morning, bleary-eyed and coffee-stained, and delivered the verdict flat out, no sugarcoating. Mr. Rayner, your system isn't broken. It's locked. With a key only one person knows how to turn. We keep digging around in the code, we might trigger something worse. A full data wipe, maybe. Total loss. You need to find the guy who built it. That's your only option. That's when the panic set in. Kale started calling. First call, Elias declined, watching the screen light up and fade on his kitchen table. Second, declined. Third, fourth, fifth, all declined, one after another, the phone buzzing like an angry wasp. By the 17th call, Elias was sitting at an outdoor cafe on the riverfront, sipping a slow pour-over coffee, watching tour boats drift by on the glittering water, when the screen lit up again. He answered. Elias. Kale's voice exploded out of the speaker, raw and shaking, equal parts unhinged rage and white-knuckled terror. What the hell did you do to my system? You get back here right now or I'm pressing felony charges. This is corporate sabotage. You'll go to jail. I'll ruin you. The soft breeze off the river carried the faint smell of salt and freshly cut grass from the riverside park. Elias stirred his coffee slowly, the metal spoon clinking soft and even against the ceramic mug, matching the steady beat of his pulse. Kale, he said, his voice even, calm as still water on a windless morning. I believe my separation paperwork is finalized. You signed it yourself. Remember? You told me I was disposable. Said you could hire 3 of me for the same price. Don't play dumb with me. You broke my system on purpose. I know you did. You little snake. Did I? Elias took a slow sip of coffee. It was good, rich and dark and smooth, better than the instant sludge they kept in the Sycamore break room, the kind that tasted like burnt cardboard. Have you checked your official system administration manual? The one you signed off on last spring without reading it? Turn to page 27, section 8. Source plugin permission protocols. He paused, letting the silence stretch across the line, letting Kale squirm. It says, verbatim, that core system access is bound to the lead developer's employee account. Deactivation requires formal in-person handover and signed acknowledgement. Did you schedule a handover meeting with me? No. Did you ask me to walk anyone through the architecture? No. You didn't even let me grab my jacket before you showed me the door. You tossed me out like trash. Now you're reaping what you sowed. Dead air on the other end of the line. Elias could hear Kale breathing, heavy and ragged, like he'd been sprinting up a flight of stairs. Elias, he said, and the arrogance was gone now, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone, the kind of voice a con man uses when he knows he's caught. Come on, buddy. Let's talk this out, man to man. You come back, I'll give you a raise. Double your salary. Triple. Whatever you want. Name your price. We'll forget this ever happened. Buddy. Elias's jaw tightened, just a little, a faint flex of muscle under the skin. That one word, fake and slimy, made his stomach turn worse than any late-night takeout ever had. Kale, he said, quiet now, sharp as a freshly honed chisel edge. Do you remember what you told me in my interview? 3 years ago, in this same office. Silence. Kale didn't remember. He told the same lie to 100 different desperate new graduates. You said, Elias, stick with me, and in 3 years you'll own a house in this city. It's been 3 years. I can barely afford a down payment on a bathroom in the suburbs. He set his coffee cup down in its saucer, the sound soft and final, like a gavel striking wood. I've been eating your promises for 3 years. Gave me an ulcer, honestly. I'm not hungry anymore. He hung up. Then he blocked the number, tapping the screen once, sharp and sure. He sat there for a while longer, watching the boats go by, the sun warm on his face, the wind tangling softly in his hair. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel vindicated, not really. He just felt light, like he'd set down something heavy he'd been carrying for a very long time, something he hadn't even realized was crushing his lungs until it was gone. By day 4, the story had spilled out into the industry press, spreading like wildfire across design forums and professional social media. An article titled Sycamore Interior System Collapse Halts $200 million in Luxury Projects, Founder Accused of Wage Theft by Former Staff Blew Up Overnight, shared thousands of times across the regional design community. The comments section erupted within hours. A former senior designer left a long, detailed top comment. 3 years ago I quit because Kale owed me $40,000 in commission. Said he'd pay when the project closed. The project closed 2.5 years ago. I've emailed, called, showed up at the office. Still waiting. Guy's a thief. A building materials supplier commented an hour later, Sycamore owes me $130,000 in natural stone invoices. 2 years late. Kale blocked my number, blocked my email, had security escort me out when I tried to talk to him. Ruined my small business. Glad he's getting what's coming. In 48 hours, more than 40 people came forward with their own stories. Designers stiffed on overtime and commissions. Sales reps cheated out of bonuses. Vendors strung along for months on unpaid bills. One intern wrote about being forced to sign a voluntary pay cut agreement during her 3rd week just to keep her minimum wage position. Every story was the same at its core. Kale Rayner saw people as tools, to be used up and thrown away when they stopped being useful. Journalists picked up the threads and dug deeper. Article after article dropped, each one more damning than the last. From design darling to deadbeat, the fall of Sycamore Interiors. Whistleblowers allege Kale Rayner falsified contracts to steal small business innovation grants. Asterisk exclusive. One man built Sycamore's prize tech. When he left, the whole company broke star. That last one was about him. Elias read it sitting at his kitchen table, eating toast and scrambled eggs, his coffee gone cold beside him. The article laid out his resume cleanly. Top of his class at the Academy of Design, Masters in Spatial Architecture with honors, hired straight out of grad school by Sycamore. 600 design packages in 3 years. Sole developer of the source rendering engine and the material database that had become an unofficial industry standard. The last line quoted an anonymous former coworker. Elias guessed it was Quinn, though he couldn't be sure. Elias is probably the most talented designer in the entire state. But he's so quiet. In a place like Sycamore, all hustle and chest-thumping and ego, the quiet ones get eaten alive. The quiet ones get eaten alive. Elias repeated the phrase to himself, soft, around a bite of slightly burnt toast. He thought of his father's workshop, of the way oak grows slow, year after year, adding ring after ring, silent and steady. No one hears it grow. No one sees the work happening under the bark. But when you cut it open, you see every year, every season, every storm it survived. The hardest, strongest wood always comes from the slowest, quietest growth. His father had never been a loud man. Never argued with clients, never bragged about his work, never advertised. He just built cabinets that lasted 100 years, doors that hung straight, joints that never came loose. People found him by word of mouth because his work spoke for itself, louder than any sales pitch ever could. Cale had never been able to see it. The work under the surface. The roots. But that didn't mean they weren't there. That evening, as the sun set pink and orange over the industrial skyline outside his window, he got a friend request on his professional social media profile. The profile picture showed a middle-aged man in a well-tailored navy suit, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with leather-bound design monographs and award trophies. He had a calm, thoughtful face, crinkles around his eyes from smiling, a faint silver streak in his dark hair. The request message was simple, no fluff, no sales pitch. Elias, this is Lucian Thorne from Havenwood Design. I'd like to speak with you at your convenience. Elias's breath caught, just a little, in his chest. Havenwood Design. The undisputed top firm in the region, maybe the whole country. Lucian Thorne was a legend, self-made, billionaire at 40, winner of 2 Andrew Martin International Designer of the Year awards, the kind of person Cale Rayner spent every waking minute fantasizing about being. Cale had spent years bragging to anyone who would listen that he'd dethrone Havenwood someday. He'd never even gotten close enough to be considered a competitor. Elias stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before he clicked accept. He'd studied Lucian's work in design school, written papers on his approach to light and materiality, looked up to him more than any other designer working today. The idea that Lucian Thorne knew who he was made his pulse speed up, just a little. A voice message popped up 30 seconds later, before Elias could even type a greeting. Lucian's voice was low, warm, polished, but not pretentious, like well-worn leather broken in perfectly over years. Elias, thank you for accepting. I hope this isn't out of line. I went through your portfolio last night, all 600 projects, every render, every floor plan. I didn't sleep much, honestly. Your sense of spatial storytelling, the way you handle natural light, your material intuition, I haven't seen anyone at your level in this industry in a very long time. The work speaks for itself. Thank you, Elias typed back, his fingers hovering awkwardly over the keyboard. That's very kind of you to say. I've long admired your work. It's not kindness. It's fact. The reply came fast, like he was sitting right by his phone, waiting for a response. I want you to come to Havenwood. Design director, leading our residential studio. Base salary $480,000 a year, plus project performance bonuses, plus company equity. Name your terms. Whatever you need to make this work. I'm not here to lowball you. Elias stared at the screen. For $180,000 a year. 3 days ago, he'd been making $5,800 a month. He sat back in his rickety kitchen chair, processing the number, but it didn't feel real. It wasn't the money that stunned him, not exactly. It was the recognition. The idea that someone had looked at his work, really looked, and seen all of it. The design, the code, the years of quiet work no one else had bothered to notice. The idea that someone valued him not for how loud he could talk, but for what he could build with his hands and his mind. He typed a single question, slow and deliberate. "You know about the Sycamore situation, right? The system lock? All the press." "I do." The answer was immediate, no hesitation. "I know more than that. I got a detailed look at the source system architecture last year when a high-net-worth client sent us a Sycamore file for a second opinion on a renovation. Your engineering work impressed me even more than your design work." "That's a rare combination." Elias huffed a quiet laugh, shaking his head a little. "Aren't you worried I'll build a backdoor into Havenwood systems too? That'll lock you out someday if we disagree." This time, Lucian sent a voice note. He was laughing, a low, warm, genuine chuckle, not mean or mocking. "Elias, you signed a paper walking away from every cent of severance you were legally owed. You didn't demand a payout. You didn't blackmail him for money. A person who does that isn't motivated by greed. You did what you did because Cale Rayner treated you like disposable labor. Like you weren't even a person. I don't intend to make that mistake. At Havenwood, people who build things get treated like people. That's non-negotiable." Elias held his phone in his hand, staring at the faded paint on his kitchen wall. For a second, his throat felt tight, like there was a lump there he couldn't swallow down. No one had ever put it that way before. No one had ever looked past the quiet exterior and seen the anger, the pride, the quiet refusal to be dehumanized. Everyone had always just seen the quiet guy, easy to push around, easy to take advantage of. Lucian had seen more than that, in one night of looking at his work. He thought about all those nights alone in the office, stomach aching, eyes burning, staring at a screen. Thought about Lila taking credit for his work, smiling for photos while he sat in the back of the room. Thought about Cale calling him a loss, dead weight, easily replaced. Thought about his father's hands, calloused and steady, building something real, one cut at a time. "I have one condition," he typed finally, his fingers sure on the screen. "Name it." "At the Design Expo next month. I want a booth right next to Sycamore's. I'm going to do a live technical demo." "Demo of what?" "I'm going to log into the Sycamore system live, in front of everyone. Show them exactly what's under the hood of that industry-leading AI tool they've been bragging about for the last 2 years. Show everyone what happens when you cut every corner and treat your people like nothing." Lucian didn't reply for 5 full seconds. Elias waited, wondering if he'd gone too far, if Lucian would think it was too petty, too dramatic. Then his message came through, short and sure, no hesitation at all. "I'll book you the best booth on the floor. Front and center. Whatever you need." The Design Expo opened on a bright, crisp Thursday morning at the downtown convention center. Crowds poured through the glass doors all morning, hundreds of designers, contractors, developers, and reporters, all here to see the latest trends, the biggest firms, the flashiest new products. The air hummed with conversation and ambient music, the scent of fresh carpet and overpriced convention center coffee drifting through the halls. Havenwood's booth was front and center on the main aisle, 3 times the size of Sycamore's, sleek and minimalist, warm white oak finishes and soft warm lighting that made the space feel like a home rather than a trade show booth. But size wasn't the point. The point was that Sycamore's booth was right next door. Cale had dumped his last remaining cash into his setup, desperate to salvage his reputation, win back clients, pretend everything was fine. A giant curved LED screen looped footage of his greatest hits, all projects from the year before, every single one designed by Elias. The soundtrack was swelling orchestral music, the graphics polished and expensive, the booth staffed with pretty models in branded blazers handing out glossy brochures. But anyone paying attention could see the truth. There was nothing new. Number 2024 projects, no fresh renders, no recent work on display. Because there couldn't be. The system was still broken, and no one could fix it. Cale was standing front and center by the entrance, wearing a brand new tailored designer suit, his hair slicked back with too much product, a forced smile plastered on his face as he schmoozed a group of potential developer clients. Elias could see him from the back of the Havenwood booth, could see the tightness around his eyes, the way he kept glancing nervously at the crowd, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for someone to call him out. Lila was beside him, caked in heavy makeup that couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, her smile shaky and brittle. She kept fidgeting with her pearl necklace, twisting it around and around her finger, her eyes darting around like she expected someone to yell at her any second. Every time a reporter walked by, she ducked her head and pretended to look at a sample book. At 10 o'clock sharp, Elias stepped up onto the small presentation stage at the front of the Havenwood booth. He was wearing a well-fitted charcoal suit, the first nice suit he'd ever owned, bought the week before with a little of his savings. The giant screen behind him flickered to life, crisp white text on a dark charcoal background, deconstructing the foundation, what design systems actually cost. 200 people packed the space in front of the stage, more crowding in from the aisle, drawn by the promise of a technical deep dive from the man everyone was talking about. Designers, reporters, industry leaders. A few of Elias's old Sycamore clients were there, too, faces he recognized from years of meetings and presentations. Lucian sat in the front row, dead center. He caught Elias's eye right before he started and gave a small, steady nod, no fanfare, just quiet support. "Good morning, everyone." Elias's voice carried clear through the speakers, calm and even, no trace of nerves, just the quiet confidence of someone talking about the thing he knew best in the world. "I'm Elias Voss, the new design director at Havenwood. Today I'm not here to talk about aesthetics or color trends or how to sell a luxury vision to high-end clients. I'm here to talk about the part no one ever sees, the foundation. The code, the data, the hours of invisible work that make every pretty rendering possible." Behind him, the screen shifted. The Sycamore Interiors System login screen filled the entire display, familiar to anyone who'd ever seen a Sycamore client presentation. A low murmur went through the crowd. People leaned forward, phones coming out to record. Cale saw it from his booth. His face went from pale to deep purple in about 2 seconds. He stormed across the aisle, fists clenched at his sides, only to be stopped short by 2 Havenwood security guards, firm but polite, holding the line of the booth with their bodies. "Elias," he shouted, red-faced, spitting mad, drawing stares from everyone within 50 feet. "That is proprietary software. You turn that off right now or I'll see you into the ground. This is theft. This is industrial espionage," Cale, Elias said, not raising his voice, just letting the microphone carry it clearly across the aisle so everyone could hear. "Please don't interrupt a public technical demonstration. What you're looking at is the Sycamore public demo environment. It's accessible to anyone on your company website, free of charge, for marketing purposes. Today, I'm going to use it to show all of you a design flaw that's been hiding in the system for 3 years. A flaw you chose to ignore over and over again." The crowd went quiet. Every eye was on the giant screen. For the next 20 minutes, Elias took the system apart, layer by layer, slow and methodical, like a surgeon laying out anatomy for a lecture hall. He showed them the material database, how the core index was backwards, how when a designer selected Italian Calicata marble, the system actually pulled specs for budget-engineered stone, leading to consistent cost overruns and material mismatches on job sites. He showed them the lighting engine, how the parameter boundaries were completely unprotected, how any ceiling over 11.5 feet would cause light sources to drift randomly, which was why every Sycamore high-ceiling project had clients complaining that the lights look nothing like the renderings. He showed them bug reports, feature requests, security upgrade proposals. 7 separate formal documents he'd submitted to Cale over 3 years, all dated, all with Cale's scrawled, "denied" in the margins, all with notes about cost control and unnecessary expense. Then he showed them the lock. Live, in front of everyone, he ran a simulation of a full lead developer account deactivation. On the giant screen, a lavish, full-color rendering of a luxury master suite began to fade, slow at first, then faster. The rich jewel tones bleached out, leaving only crisp black vector lines. The textures dissolved one by one, leaving bare geometric frames. The furniture vanished. Then the walls themselves thinned and faded, until all that was left was a blank white screen, empty as a sheet of paper before the first pencil stroke. Total silence from the crowd. "This isn't a hack," Elias said, turning back to face the audience, his voice steady. "It's a design failure. I built this system from the ground up, alone, on unpaid overtime, with zero technical support, zero budget, zero training for anyone else on staff. I asked 7 times for a security audit, for cross-training, for system redundancy to prevent exactly this kind of failure. 7 times I was told no. It works fine, stop wasting company money." Those were his exact words. He tapped the screen once, and a detailed chart popped up. Sycamore Interiors, 3-year financial breakdown, compiled from public tax filings and industry reports. Over the last 3 years, Sycamore has grossed over $25 million in revenue. Total investment in technology and development, less than half of 1%. 12 designers on staff. 1 developer. Me. He paused, letting the numbers sink in, letting the crowd do the math. During that same time, Cale Rayner's documented personal spending, sports car, riverfront condo, family luxury vacations, private club memberships, totaled over $3.2 million. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, louder this time, a mix of shock and disgust. Cale was still standing by the security line, but all the color had drained out of his face, leaving him ashen gray. He looked like he might pass out. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. All the bluster, all the arrogance, was gone. "This isn't a story about one broken system," Elias said, his voice steady, holding the full attention of every person in the aisle. "It's a story about what happens when you treat the people who build your company like disposable parts. When you treat skill like a commodity, dignity like a luxury, and honesty like a weakness. Systems don't break because of one line of bad code. They break because the people at the top stop caring about the work. And when that happens, it's not a question of if it falls apart. It's only a question of when." For a beat, there was total silence. Then the applause started. It wasn't loud at first. Not the raucous cheering of a crowd entertained by a spectacle. It was steady, sincere, the kind of applause that comes with respect. It built and built, filling the whole aisle, echoing off the convention center ceiling. Lucian Thorne stood up first, clapping slow and steady. Then the whole front row. Then almost everyone in the crowd, designers and reporters and clients alike, standing and clapping for the quiet guy who'd built everything and never said a word. Elias stood there on the small stage and took it. He didn't preen. He didn't smile big or soak it up. He just nodded, once, quiet as always, a small, grateful tilt of his chin. Somewhere, deep in his chest, something settled, soft and warm and finally at peace. His father would have been proud. A week later, Cale Rayner was arrested at his penthouse condo. The charges were twofold: willful failure to pay wages across dozens of employees, and felony contract fraud tied to the falsified grant applications and fake client contracts. 43 former employees had signed on to a joint labor complaint, their stories corroborated by hundreds of pages of evidence. When investigators executed a search warrant on his office, they found 2 sets of forged company seals in his office safe, along with a stack of falsified client contracts and doctored grant application paperwork. Sycamore Interiors filed for bankruptcy 2 days after that. Its assets were frozen, its projects abandoned, its reputation completely irreparable. Elias heard the news in the middle of a team meeting at Havenwood, going over initial plans for the new Riverfront Arts Center project. His phone buzzed once on the conference table, a short text from Quinn. "Dude, check the news. It's over." He excused himself for a minute, stepped out into the quiet glass-walled hallway, and pulled up the breaking news article on his phone. There was a photo. Cale, still in that same expensive designer suit, but rumpled now, his hair a greasy mess, his wrists cuffed in front of him, being led to a police car by 2 uniformed officers. The picture was grainy, shot from across the street by a paparazzi, but you could see his face clear enough. Hollow, defeated, completely broken, all the arrogance drained right out of him. Elias stared at the screen for a long moment, standing alone in the hallway, the distant hum of the office around him. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel vengeful. He didn't feel much of anything, really, except a faint, tired sort of relief. The kind you feel when you finally finish a huge, months-long drawing, and you set down your pencil and step back, and you don't think I'm amazing. You just think, it's done. The work is finished. The labor arbitration ruling came a few days later, delivered to his office by courier. He was awarded back pay, unpaid overtime, withheld commissions, and unpaid benefits contributions, plus statutory penalties. Total, $74,200. It wasn't a fortune. Not compared to the millions he'd generated for Sycamore, not compared to his new salary at Havenwood. But it was the first time in his life someone had put it in writing, official and legal and unarguable, stamped with a court seal. You were wronged. You deserved better. Elias folded the paperwork neatly and put it in a file folder, tucked away in the back of his desk drawer. He didn't frame it. He didn't brag about it to anyone. He just closed the drawer and went back to work because there were designs to draw, systems to build, projects that mattered. A year later, he walked back into the design expo again. This time, he wasn't a speaker. He was a judge. Havenwood had had an incredible year. 3 landmark projects, all overseen by Elias, each one praised for its thoughtful use of light and material. The Riverfront Arts Center had won an International Design Award, its name printed in design magazines all over the world. Magazines were calling Elias the new voice of luxury design, profiling him in long features that talked about his quiet genius and humble approach to craft. Lucian joked at company meetings that Elias was getting so famous, he'd have to give him another raise just to keep him. Elias would just shake his head and smile, a small, quiet smile. My dad always said, a good carpenter doesn't leave a shop that treats him right. I'm not going anywhere. The awards ceremony wrapped up late in the afternoon, golden sunlight slanting through the convention center's high-glass windows. Elias said his goodbyes to colleagues and fellow judges, slung his suit jacket over one shoulder, and headed for the parking garage, his 2 assistants walking a step behind him, going over next week's project schedule in low voices. He was almost to his car, walking through the dim concrete parking garage, when he saw him. Standing by the main parking booth, in a faded, ill-fitting security guard uniform, a cheap plastic walkie-talkie clipped to his belt, scuffed work boots on his feet. Cale Rayner. He'd lost a lot of weight. His cheekbones jutted out sharply under sallow skin. Half his hair had gone gray, thin and unkempt. The uniform was too big for him, the sleeves bunching up at his wrists, the convention center logo faded and cracked on the chest. He was leaning against the booth, staring at the ground, looking like he'd been drained of every drop of energy he'd ever had. He was working security at the convention center. Elias had heard the rumors, secondhand, from people who'd run into him around town. Cale had pled guilty to all charges, paid back what he could to his victims, gotten probation to avoid jail time. But no one in the design industry would hire him, not after everything that came out. His house had been foreclosed on. His wife had left him, taken the kids, moved across the country to start over. His sister wouldn't speak to him, not after what had happened to Lila, who'd been blacklisted from every firm in town and had to move back in with her parents. He had no one left. Cale looked up just as Elias approached, and their eyes met. He froze. It wasn't anger that crossed his face. It was fear. Pure, animal, gut-deep fear. He gripped his walkie-talkie so tight his knuckles went white. He ducked his head, tried to shrink back into the shadow of the booth, like if he made himself small enough, Elias wouldn't see him. Like he was scared of what Elias might do, scared of what else Elias could take from him. Elias kept walking, his pace steady, his expression unchanged. He wasn't there to gloat. He wasn't there to rub it in. He was just walking to his car. That was all. Cale Rayner was just a stranger now, standing by a parking booth. Cale stepped directly into his path for a split second, like he was going to say something, like he was going to beg or yell or apologize. He looked at Elias's official judge's badge, pinned to his lapel, polished and gold. Looked at the 2 professional assistants walking behind him, notebooks in hand. Glanced at the black Havenwood company car, idling by the curb, driver in a crisp uniform holding the back door open. His mouth moved. No sound came out. Then he stepped back. He bowed his head, turned sideways, and shrank back against the booth, out of the way, his eyes fixed on the scuffed concrete at his feet. Elias walked past him, close enough to smell the cheap laundry detergent on his uniform. He'd taken 3 steps past the booth when he heard it. A voice, rough and cracked and barely audible, like it was being scraped out of a dry, raw throat. Elias. He didn't stop walking. I'm sorry. Elias paused. For exactly 1 second. Then he kept going, his stride unbroken, like he hadn't heard anything at all. He didn't turn around. He didn't acknowledge it. He didn't forgive him, and he didn't refuse to forgive him. It didn't matter anymore. Cale Rayner wasn't part of his world. He wasn't even a villain anymore. He was just a stranger. A man who'd destroyed himself with his own greed, and that was its own punishment. The driver held the car door open. Elias slid into the cool leather backseat. The car pulled away smoothly, merging into the downtown traffic. It was a beautiful November day. Bright sun, clear pale blue sky. The silk floss trees lining the boulevard were in full bloom, thick with fluffy pink flowers. Petals swirled in the wind, tapping soft and light against the car window, like tiny kisses. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. A text from Lucian. Celebration dinner tonight at the riverfront place. Don't be late. Elias typed back a single letter, quick and sure. K. He locked his phone, set it aside on the leather seat, and leaned back against the headrest, closing his eyes. He didn't think about the awards. He didn't think about the job title, or the salary, or the magazine profiles, or all the people who now knew his name. He didn't think about Cale, standing alone in that dim parking booth, surrounded by concrete and regret. What he thought about was a night, 3 years before. 3 a.m. in the Sycamore office. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, cold and white, making everything look washed out and tired. The office empty, everyone else gone home to their beds and their families. He'd been hunched over his desk for 12 hours straight, his stomach burning so bad he could barely sit up straight, antacid tablets dissolving bitter on his tongue. His eyes stung from staring at the screen. His hands shook a little, from exhaustion and caffeine and the dull constant pain. Cale had stumbled in around then, drunk and loud from a nightclub downtown, stopping by to grab his car keys from his office. He'd paused by Elias's cubicle, leaned against the partition for a second, glanced at the screen, at the half-finished rendering glowing blue-white in the dark. Finish that before you leave, he'd said, slurring a little. That was all. No thank you. No, you're doing great. No, get some rest, you've put in enough hours. Just that. A command, given to a tool, not a person. Elias had sat there for a full minute after he left, staring at the screen, the pain in his stomach sharp and hot, mixing with the bitter taste of antacid and coffee. He'd said to himself, quiet, so no one could hear, so only the empty office and the buzzing lights knew. Remember this. Then he'd washed down another antacid with half a cup of cold, bitter, day-old coffee and hit render. The car glided down the tree-lined boulevard. Golden sunlight filtered through the pink blossoms, dappling the inside of the car, warm on Elias's face. Elias opened his eyes. He looked out the window at the city passing by, the trees, the sunlight, the people walking on the sidewalk, laughing and talking and living their lives. He took a slow, deep breath, filling his lungs with clean, warm air. And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't have anything to remember.